Well, it's been about a year since I last did a super DIY episode, so I thought we would do another one. This time round, I'm going to be speaking with Mark Pesce about his new internet-connected Uber lamp, and we're going to catch up with Stephen from the Canberra UAV team that we spoke to oh so long ago. I'm James Purser, and this is episode 10 of Purser Explores the World. For those of you who haven't listened to the previous Super DIY episode, basically it goes like this. I find people who embody a bit of that MacGyver spirit and talk to them about what they are doing. Now, for those of you too young to know who MacGyver was, think of the ultimate do-it-yourselfer with a mullet. A really glorious mullet. Anyway, the people I'm going to be speaking with this episode, they embody that spirit in some way. First up, we're going to catch up with Stephen Dade from the Canberra UAV team and hear how they went in the recently finished Outback Challenge.
After setting up next to the runway at the airport, we had an automatic takeoff. Our pilot just flicked a switch on his controller and our UAV took off and disappeared into the horizon. At that stage, we were just continually monitoring our screens on the ground station. I was shaking for most of it because I was just waiting for the moment when the UAV would just dive into the ground or something would go wrong, and it was interesting.
So you've let your baby out. You've let it fly. How did it go?
It went well. We managed to get nearly all of the challenge done. I mean, we found Outback Joe with an amazing degree of accuracy. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to do the bottle drop due to technical difficulties, but the plane came back, it landed, it's in one piece, and we're quite happy with that.
So when you say mostly in one piece...
minus the bottle that dropped off about 7 minutes into the flight.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So you did actually drop the bottle, just not where it was meant to be dropped.
Yes. The best theory we have at the moment is that about 7 minutes into the flight, our ground control station showed that the bottle had been dropped just by itself. We didn't command it to do anything. Plus, the UAV had started slowing down to about half its speed. At that stage, we thought maybe it was engine trouble or something, because the throttle was still set at the same point. Combined with the bottle drop mechanism showing the bottle had been dropped, we'd assumed that the bottle had somehow come off and become entangled in the propeller of the UAV. Which was, at that stage, was nothing we could do about it except just continue on. When the UAV got back and landed and we inspected it, we'd found that the parachute string connecting the parachute to the water bottle was tangled all the way through the propeller. And at that point, it became fairly obvious what had actually happened. Seems, our best guess at this point is that the parachute string had somehow come loose during flight, and it had drifted back to our propeller. And the moment that string had got into the propeller would have just spun the string around and just clawed it all up, and in the process it would have ripped the bottle off the fuselage of our UAV and then just flung it off into the ground or something. Sorry,
I was just going to say, but despite that little setback, and the UAV did pretty well considering you said that it tangled this rope all around the propeller.
Yeah, we were when the UAV had landed, it was a miracle that the engine had kept going. I mean, if it had been a smaller, less powerful engine, it would have just stopped and the UAV would have fallen out of the sky. The advantage we have is that the engine on our UAV is very, very powerful for what we're doing. I mean, most of the time when we're cruising, we're only at about 45% of capacity. Whereas once the string had come into it, we had to then boost our power up to about 65%, so an extra 20% to get up to our nominal cruising speed. If we hadn't had that extra 20% spare on our engine power, we would not have had enough speed to keep the UAV in flight.
This process has gone on for what, at least 18 months, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's close to 2 years now. I think probably 22, 23 months at this point, since we first heard about the Outback Challenge and decided that it would be very awesome to enter a team into it. Little did we know what would eventually happen.
Well, you've learnt a lot along the way, haven't you? In terms of building the UAV, the systems that are involved.
Yes, I mean, yeah, this time 2 years ago, I knew nothing about UAVs or the associated electronics. I mean, and neither did anyone in our team. So we've developed skills in things like airframes and aerodynamics, avionics, and sort of programming and developing autopilots, cameras, image recognition, radio links and radios, as well as sort of how the best way to drop a bottle of water from 90 meters up, which took a fair bit of experimenting as well.
And then it turns out that the best way to do it is to get the line tangled in the propeller.
Yes, yeah, pretty much. We actually, the couple of days after the competition, we had a spare day there, and we thought it'd be a good idea to go out searching for the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the guys in our team had analysed the data from our flight and come up with the four most likely areas that the bottle will come down in. So we searched those four areas. We spent a couple of hours doing that in the hot Queensland sun. And we ended up finding the bottle, which
Very
was
good.
awesome. And it was intact. It was in one piece. The liquid was still in there, just sort of sitting there on the ground with a chopped off piece of string attached to it.
Well, okay, so where do you go from here?
Oh, that's an excellent question. At this point, we're sort of still in celebration mode, as it is.
Well deserved too.
Oh, yes. We definitely want to enter the next UAV challenge, whenever that is, whether it be in 2013 or 2014, whenever that is next announced. I mean, in the meantime, what we want to do is get on with developing better systems. I think the general feeling in the team at the moment is that we want to contribute as much open source hardware and software to the amateur civilian UAV community. So we've got lots of ideas for small little projects like more accurate GPS modules on one hand. On the other hand, things like better quality, higher bandwidth radio links, as well as better image processing algorithms. We want to continually improve on what we're doing and let everyone in the world have access to this, so that just to show that civilian UAVs, they're capable of having all this reliable, awesome technology on them, which can be used for good.
If you want all the news and the pictures from the Canberra UAV entry into the Outback Challenge, then go along to canberrauav.com. They're doing some very cool work, and I'm just going to keep an eye on them and see how far they go from here on in. Now, our next super do-it-yourselfer is Mark Pesce. You probably heard the name. He's a futurist and has been no stranger to invention himself. He was heavily involved in the development of the virtual reality markup language and other virtual reality projects in the early 90s, and he's kept his hand in play ever since. Now, recently, Mark came into contact with the open hardware platform known as Raspberry Pi, and something clicked. But I'll let Mark tell you about it.
Basically, it's the marriage of a fairly sophisticated computer that's now cheap enough to drive a string of individually controllable full-color LEDs. So you just sort of take those two things, and computing's always been quite expensive, and really people just connected it to monitors. Well, now computing is cheap enough. The core chips that we use to provide the CPU for the light by Moore's Cloud cost a total of around $12. That's the CPU, the RAM, and the SD card. That's pretty much what you need, and then the associated little bibs and bobs to make it all work correctly. Because of Moore's law, the prices kept on dropping and dropping and dropping. So now we have a CPU running at 0.5 gigahertz, an ARM chip, so it's similar to what you'd find in a smartphone. And it's there, and it's running a full distribution of Linux. It's running Arch Linux. So that means that you now have all of the packages. You have Apache, you have MySQL, you have presumably Java, although we haven't tried to use Java because it probably does not have enough RAM to run Java. So it's all of that, but it's at a price point that then makes it possible to sell it to people. Now, when we're talking to our industrial designers, Tiller Design over here in Annandale, and they said, Mark, we want to be able to retail this at $99, James. And they said to us, Mark, you can't go buy a lamp for $99. And true enough, I've been out shopping in, window shopping in the trendier shops in the eastern suburbs. Now, admittedly, this is not a fair sampling of anything, but, it's at least a sample. And I was in a shop in the Bondi Junction Westfield on Saturday, and they had these very cute lamps that just had a single bulb in them. They were all sort of translucent plastic of different colors, and they were all about 30 centimeters high. And I walked up and said, how much is that lovely little lamp that's just made out of plastic and has a single bulb in it? And he said, oh, it's $149, sir. And I was like, okay, that's 50% more than I'm going to be charging for my lamp that has a full computer and lots of pretty LEDs. So we've gotten to the point with our ability to mass produce gadgets that we can now do things at really interesting price points that allow people to have really interesting devices.
And for you, you're a futurist. You're an inveterate inventor, basically. You like playing with the shiny things, and Moore's Cloud is pretty much your definition of a shiny thing. This price point where we get Raspberry Pis, Arduinos, and that sort of stuff, that's just going to open up a huge vista of home invention, isn't it?
Yeah. The genesis for me with this was the fact that I got my hands on a Raspberry Pi on the 4th of June. One of my friends had finally gotten theirs. They got theirs before they got mine, and they lent it to me. And it was through playing with the Raspberry Pi that I got this idea, because the first thing I did was figure out how to light an LED, which, of course, is sort of the hardware hacker's version of Hello World. Mm-hmm. And I got that up and running, and I realized it was running Linux, so I could throw Apache on it, so I did. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm running Apache, and I can light an LED. I'm going to connect Apache to the LED. And then I posted a tweet and told all my friends that if they hit this tweet, it would turn the LED on and off. And then I spent the next couple of days watching Twitter turn my LED on and off, including one of my friends actually writing a Perl script that took my tweets, translated them into Morse code, and then winked them back at me.
Very nice.
A man with too much time on his hands right there. And it was somewhere in there. And then I think I went on holidays in Thailand. And for anyone who hasn't been to Thailand, the Thai love rope light. They love it. So, that sort of cheap by the meter LED lighting that basically does a single color, might have a few patterns on it, similar to what you can get for Christmas tree lights here in Australia. Mm-hmm. But it's everywhere there. They festoon it. And there was some sort of collision in my brain between the work that I was doing at home and watching all of this rope light in Thailand. And by the time I came home, I was like, oh, wait, I know what I need to do. I need to get my Raspberry Pi to drive a whole string of full-color LEDs. And that became the very first prototype for the light.
You've started a Kickstarter for this project. It's not just a look what we can do. You're actually looking to mass produce it, aren't you?
Well, I guess the thing is that if we want to be able to manufacture these so that they can be sold at a $99 price point, we actually have to go through an entire manufacturing design cycle. And the manufacturing design cycle to do that costs about $250,000. And I don't have that kind of money. So I figured that the best thing I could do was to raise that money. Now, the difference between, say, when I was doing startups 20 years ago and the way that you can do startups now is that you can crowdfund. So you can use a tool like a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo or whatever it might be, a Plausible in Australia, to spread the risk around the people who are interested in the fruit of that risk. And that's essentially what we're doing. So we're crowdfunding. We need to raise $700,000 because while we only need $250,000 to actually do the engineering design, we have to be able to give people lights at the end. So we have to pay not just for the manufacturing design process, but we actually have to pay for all of the material associated with actually building the lights. And the first set of lights are simply going to cost more than the next 100,000 because they have the additional tooling costs associated with them. So
and economies of scale.
Yeah, exactly. So we're asking for $700,000, which in our first 24 hours we raised about 6% of, which I'm very happy about. 6.5%.
Yeah, I was watching that flick by actually, and you've got. Hold on, let me have a look. I've just got the page up here. You've got at the moment 366 people who have committed who have pledged the $99 for the to actually get a Moore's Cloud.
Yes. So, yeah, 370 is what I see. But yes, absolutely. So that's the number of people. We're going to need a lot more than that. We're going to need something closer to 7,000 to actually step up in order to be able to fully fund the process. So the next 59 days for myself and the entire team, who are amazing, and I should talk about the team for a second, because the most amazing thing about this was that I didn't do this myself, James. There's no way I could have done this myself. I'm not an industrial designer. My hardware design skills are meager. Yes, I can write code, but I'm not particularly good at visualization. I don't really have strong marketing skills. So really what happened was all of these people got excited and decided to participate in the process. And now I have some of the best people in Australia working with me on making this happen. So that's sort of part of it. And then the other part of it was, okay, you could have gone the old route and tried to sort of walk around and get investment money from someone who had a lot of money, or you can actually go directly to the people, which is what we're doing.
You're going through the process of getting the Kickstarter up. You're going to be producing these, but you're not keeping it closed source, are you?
No. And again, this is, I'll tell you a little story. So I was deeply involved in the virtual reality industry. This is my first startup. Ono Sendai. So San Francisco, 1991, 1992, we had a startup called Ono Sendai, and it was one among many, many virtual reality startups in San Francisco at that time. And what I learned from that experience was that one of the reasons the virtual reality industry imploded was because everyone was too tight with their intellectual property, and it basically stifled innovation. And the whole thing started to implode in 92, 93. And as I walked away from the burning wreck of it, the next thing I did was invent VRML, which I immediately open sourced because I realized that if I wanted VRML to get anywhere in the world, people would have to be able to use it. And VRML went further than any other, at that time, any other standard, and did so for almost a decade because it was open to all. And that's a lesson I've taken to heart. So almost all of the inventing that I've done in the years since then, I've shared because it seems to be the best way to treat an invention.
Well, you're doing pretty much open from end to end, really. I mean, you started with the Raspberry Pi, which was open hardware. Yeah. You've gone with open funding, open sourcing of the funds, and you're open sourcing the code and design at the end of the process.
Yes, and the hardware, our current hardware implementation is the All-Linux Wino, which we'll be adapting, which is another open hardware design, which is based roughly on the Chumby, which is another open hardware design. So it's all open all the way down. And beyond that, we've also decided that our business practice is open. So what we've done, and we don't know that there's another Kickstarter project that's ever done it, is we've posted the full financials for how the $700,000 has been allocated. And everyone who goes to the Kickstarter page, don't even have to back us, just go to the Kickstarter page and there's a link there and you'll be able to go and take a look at our numbers. The thought there being that we need to be absolutely transparent with people about their money, because there's been a great deal of problems with Kickstarter projects over-promising and under-delivering. Mm-hmm. People may not be aware of all of the ins and outs of taking something through a manufacturing cycle. And we wanted to demonstrate as clearly as we could that we understood the issues involved. Now, we may not have gotten everything right because really no one's perfect, but we have done the best we possibly can. And the only way that we can make that case is by releasing that information.
Why did you go with Kickstarter over, say, Indiegogo or Pozible, which is Australia-based?
Well, I think the first reason, we actually had quite a long conversation with the founder of Indiegogo over the week before we launched on Kickstarter. And I think one of the salient moments was when I told our web lead, who has been on the web for a long time, that we were talking to Indiegogo. He said, "Who?"
Uh-huh.
And so when you're talking about brand recognition, particularly in the open gadget space, no one thinks about anything but Kickstarter.
Yep.
So it made sense for us to be able to work with Kickstarter. Now, Kickstarter came with some restrictions, like people want to be able to order multiple units of lights, and according to Kickstarter's new Kickstarter is not a store policy, we can't really do that. People have to order single lights, and that's slowing our progress to our goal, but what can you do about it? It is the place that people look for open hardware and open gadgets. It's the site that ends up in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. And it's the name that's on everyone's lips for crowdfunding. And we wanted to be able to leverage that along with our own product.
So you go where the people are.
You go where the people are, and you go with the trusted, the brand that people trust.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Kickstarter's policies changes are all relatively recent, and in some sense, those changes are being tested on us. And people are taking very interesting approaches to sort of getting around those processes. And we're just sort of watching it happen. I knew it was going to happen because, let's face it, the internet is smarter than any company. So we'll see what happens, but I think it's part of an evolution. Crowdfunding is brand new in a real sense, and so everyone is feeling their way around how to do this and what's the right way. And one thing that we've done is we very early on established a blog at blog.morsecloud.com where we've been documenting more or less day by day everything associated with getting a project through conception onto Kickstarter. Hopefully that will help people who follow in our footsteps so they can avoid some of our mistakes and maybe leverage some of our strengths.
I do have one other question. Before I started the interview, you saw the tweet I put out. I got one question to ask you. Somebody had asked, what happens if the Kickstarter is not reached? And what happens if it is way oversubscribed?
Right. Okay. So if the Kickstarter is not reached, everyone gets their money back. And we are then faced with the decision about what we want to do. Mm-hmm. And, we give them that some thought because there's no question that $700,000 is a huge amount to raise on Kickstarter. I mean, we're hopeful, but there's no guarantees for anything in this world. So we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. We have given that thought. Yep. If we are wildly oversubscribed, from your lips to God's ears, if that happens, we will find ways to reward the backers. We have some ideas for features that we can add to it. And we will also use it to make sure that when we launch, there's even more things that you can do with it because we'll have had more money to lavish on the software. So essentially, the more oversubscribed we are, the richer the experience gets to be.
Now, since we recorded that interview, the Kickstarter for Moors Cloud has reached 914 backers who have committed over $100,000, and there's still 51 days to go. I had hoped to include another super DIYer to the list for this episode, however, I left the run too late. John Oxer is a man who just doesn't do it himself, he does it to himself. Not only has he created a house that he can control from his laptop, but he's gone that extra step and embedded an RFID chip in his arm to create a keyless entry system for his house. Next time I will get him. And I'd like to think there should be a next time. There is just too much cool stuff happening for it to be left for another year. I think I'm going to make your Super DIY episodes a regular thing for Purser Explores the World. What do you reckon? Okay, that's it for this fortnight. For the next episode, I'm going to be taking a look at the indie media scene in Australia. I'm going to sit down with people who are bringing new voices to the media landscape so dominated by the big players. Now, don't forget, the next episode of For Science will be out this Friday night. Magdalene, Maya and myself will be talking science and how it relates to the real world. And if you want to keep up with Purser Explores the World or other Angry Beanie projects, you can follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and circle us on Google+. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. See you later.